Jesus, I crave to know you, just to know you will satisfy my soul.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. This is episode number 217. Thank you for taking the time to join me as we continue our way in Lessons in Luke. We're nearing the end of the series as we approach Christmas in these daily devotionals. So today we are in chapter 22, and a lot goes on here in this chapter. Really the section I want to explore is starting in verse 54, but I do want to just kind of tie it to, in this chapter, we find Judas agreeing to betray Jesus. Many of you are familiar with that story, but he agrees to a certain sum of money to betray his teacher, Jesus, and so he schemes with the chief priests and officers of the temple guard, and they discuss with them how that he is going to betray him, and consenting to this sum of money. So we'll skip through, and we'll start in verse 54, where we actually are going to talk of Peter's denial of Jesus. Starting in verse 54, it says, "Then seizing him," this is speaking of Jesus, "then seizing him, they led him away and took him into the house of the high priest. Peter followed at a distance. And when some there had kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard, and had sat down together, Peter sat down with them. A servant girl saw him seated there in the firelight. She looked closely at him and said, 'This man was with him.' But he denied it. 'Woman, I don't know him,' he said." So here we're talking about Peter. A little later, someone else saw him and said, "You also are one of them." "Man, I am not," Peter replied. About an hour later, another asserted, "Certainly this fellow was with him, for he is a Galilean." Peter replied, "Man, I don't know what you're talking about." Just as he was speaking, the rooster crowed. The Lord turned and looked straight at Peter. Then Peter remembered the word the Lord had spoken to him. "Before the rooster crows today, you will disown me 3 times." And he went outside and wept bitterly. If you recall, earlier, just not too long ago, we find Peter very kind of boldly saying that he would even die for Jesus, that he would never betray him. And fast forward later in the scene, and here we see Peter doing the very thing that he swore he wouldn't do, which is betray, to disown his teacher, his master. Now, this is if you just put yourself in Peter's shoes for a moment, it's easy to just read through this and really not feel the text. But if we were to just put ourselves in Peter's shoes for a moment, and even really the scene of as Peter disowned Jesus the 3rd time and the rooster crows, the moment where the Lord turns and looks straight at Peter. I mean, if you just let that sink in, I hope you can feel the heartbreak that's in that. It came to no surprise to Jesus. He actually, spoke prophetically of this to Peter himself. So Jesus knew it was coming. But no doubt it still hurt. Jesus had feelings and emotions, and these are his brothers. They might have well has been his family. I'm sure they were with one another just as much or more than their own families. So this was a hard hit for both of them. I mean, just as Jesus feels the disappointment of the moment, and no doubt Peter felt the shame and embarrassment of the moment, the same moment. We see that when this happens and when he remembers the thing that Jesus said, he went out and he wept bitterly. As often as we, though, remember the betrayal of Judas, we so often kind of categorize him differently than we do Peter. Well, I mean, Peter goes on, he experienced repentance, and he experiences restoration. Now, if you'll search other gospel accounts, there is some additional details where Judas returns the money to those who hired him, and Judas experiences a change of heart in realizing what he has done, and he gives the money back to them, but he goes and he hangs himself. He can't carry the weight of what he's done. Judas doesn't experience restoration, but Peter does encounter that. He does get a moment of restoration. And so we know Peter today as this powerful one God used, just a regular person full of flaws and mistakes like us, but he goes on to do things for the Lord. He writes some epistles himself, and greatly used for the Lord. But we categorize Judas kind of in his own category, the one who betrayed the Lord. And it's very easy for us in our culture, especially in our Christian culture, for us to say, this person, did this and, it was bad, but this person did this and this is worse. And we identify and label people so easily in Christianity. And it's really sad and it's a shame, because if one person falls, it's no different than another person falling. Falling prey to sin is falling prey to sin. And we shouldn't be so quick to place degrees on things. Like Peter's betrayal is, a lesser degree of compromise or sin than maybe Judas's betrayal. We would say this is a higher degree of wrong. But they both sinned, they both erred. And so I think this is something that we should chew on in our own lives, is not being so quick to categorize, but realizing and recognizing that if we fall short in one thing, we fall short in anything and everything. But the beautiful thing is Peter gets the opportunity to experience restoration, but Judas doesn't give that time, and he doesn't get to experience restoration. Now, I personally don't believe that that Judas is eternally cut off from God because of his sin, and some think that he didn't experience genuine repentance. I don't hold to that perspective. I believe that if anyone can be redeemed, so can Judas. And so there's a lot that transpires that we don't really, that we're not aware of. But and so I have hope that that Judas found repentance, and that his soul was redeemed, though he himself was destroyed. It's a real sad case because many times we all can experience deep despair in our lives, and in the moment it can be so crushing and heavy to carry that the only answer seems to be escape by taking our lives. And though that is a temporary conclusion, it's a lasting one. And it's really sad because I think if time were present, then Judas could have experienced the same restoration that Peter did. However, he didn't give that time. So I think for anyone who might be listening to this that's in a very dark place, very despairing, lacks hope, I would say keep holding on, because in time you can experience too the restoration that can come only by the goodness and grace of God. But keep seeking the Lord's face, keep pressing on and holding on, and in time you can experience release and restoration and freedom and deliverance. The Lord is faithful. Even when we are not, He is faithful. So I would just encourage you to keep pressing, keep holding on, and just bury yourself in the Lord's arms. There's no one that's too far gone or too messed up to experience God's forgiveness and His kindness. He is eager to give that to any who would come to Him, despite whatever they've done. The worst of the worst, to the most innocent, He is willing and eager to pull you in and hold you just like He would a child. So thank you so much for being with me on this episode. I hope that was encouragement to you, and I look forward to speaking with you next time. God bless.
If it means that I'm close to you, I would trade 1,000,000 lifetimes for a moment here with you.